to my next guest. Rupert Lowe is an MP, sits as an independent since leaving the Reform Party. It is leader of a new group called Restore Britain. Very good afternoon to you, Rupert.
Good afternoon, Julia. How are you?
Very well indeed. Thank you very much indeed for joining me. I do just want to ask you about your former party. First of all, I want to get on to some of the policies which perhaps are more of a concern to our listeners, our audience, in terms of stuff affecting their daily lives. But we had this defection from Danny Kruger, the first sitting Tory MP. He's following the likes of former MPs like Nadine Dorries-Jake Berry, quitting the party and moving over to Reform. They've now gone back to 5 MPs after losing you in various. They've gone from 4 to 5 to 4 to 5 constantly. What do you make of the decision of a pretty senior, well-respected, sort of a thinker Tory moving over to Reform UK? Does it make you think that actually that might be the party to join back again?
Well, at the end of the day, Julia, let me say that I did as much as anybody to help build up Reform's support when I was in the party, and it was a shock to me when they, for some extraordinary reason, politically made an attempt to assassinate me. Which hasn't worked. And as you say, we've now set up Restore Britain, which is to unify people, not divide them. I was quite surprised when Danny left and joined Reform. I think Danny is a very considered politician. He's got a history of basically being involved on the front line for quite a long time. And I think he's very well respected. Well, I know he's very well respected in his constituency. So I think what you'll find, and I think from Reform's point of view, it's good news that they've managed to attract a man like Danny Kruger. I think one needs to ask him the reasons why he felt he needed to jump now, but he's chosen to do that.
Well, he gave a very long speech yesterday explaining why he believes the Conservative Party is over. I mean, you believe, don't you think the Reform's over as well?
No, I didn't. I've never said that, Julia. I respect Reform's voters. Where I have an issue is Reform's leadership. And what Reform's leadership did to me doesn't smack of a professional party. And I think, other than now Danny, there are very few people who I would describe as political heavyweights running Reform. So I don't have an issue with Reform's supporters. Indeed, I got on extremely well with most of them. Mm-hmm. I have an issue with Farage, Anderson, Yusuf, and to some extent Dickie Tice. But I don't have an issue with the supporters. The supporters are quite rightly disaffected with the way the country's being governed by both Labour and the Tories. And as you know, my view is that Parliament now is just a charade. It's a sort of group of people that the media comment on and the media talk about. But actually, the real power doesn't lie with the parties. The real power lies with the permanent secretaries in the civil service, who the front bench is singularly failing to hold to account. Okay. So, I mean, you probably have a different view, but that's my view. And I think what we've got to do before the next election is find a formula which is going to deliver for the British people. That was the genesis. I think
that's where we will all come to agreement.
The genesis of the difference between Nigel and I wanted, when it became clear to me that Reform could win the election, which was the first hurdle to get over, the first hurdle was to get people into Parliament, which we did. The second hurdle was effectively then to get to the stage where we could win the election. The third stage is then to put up structures, a plan, a shadow cabinet, policies which are going to deliver. And that needs to be planned, as we've seen from Donald Trump. He learnt from his first term in office, and he was well prepared for his second term. And that's exactly what needs to happen. And that was the genesis of my difference with Nigel, which clearly, for whatever reason, he decided I was pushing him on that, or I was becoming a threat to him, or whatever. But they did what they did for their reasons.
Okay, let's not hash over the old ground. I know you've spoken that many times. Let's talk about where we are.
I think in Danny's case, Julia, it's very important to look at old ground. Okay. I'm amazed he didn't ring me up and actually try and better understand what had happened. Okay. But anyway, he didn't.
All right.
And he may
I'd like to talk about policy, to talk about, you respect, the supporters and voters, about policy that people do care an awful lot about. According to the latest polls, in the last few months, the #1 issue for an awful lot of people, even though we're facing major economic woes, the NHS, the immigration, mass uncontrolled, illegal and legal immigration, and the inability to get rid of anybody. The government signed this deal, this 1-in, 1-out deal with France. I mean, we kind of derided it at the time on the basis it was, 50 in a week, 50-hour week, given that we've got 17 times that arriving every week, and we're going to have more people coming in legally. We're going to pay for them and all their family to come over. Not quite sure how this benefits us, but some 50 migrants were detained a few weeks back. They've been held near Heathrow. They've been assessed and approved by France to be returned to them. We understand that Air France flight from Heathrow to Charles de Gaulle Airport in Paris was due to take off yesterday with at least one deported migrant aboard. That didn't happen because of legal threats and protests by charities. And today, we understand, a 9 a.m. flight was supposed to take off with at least one Channel migrant. Again, quite a huge cost, accompanied by border officials. That didn't happen either. Do you think it is actually possible for any government to deport any of these migrants against their will?
Well, you know full well it is, Julie. You just have to have the will to do it. As you and I rudely agree, this sort of scam was never going to work. And, the British people voted in 2016 to take back their sovereignty, which means that laws passed in Parliament should be the laws that pertain to the country. As we know, that a lot of these international laws, now Tony Blair laid a lot of these Heffalump traps, the international law trumps British law. This is the problem. So what you have to have, and you probably know that yesterday we started a petition for a parliamentary debate on this issue, and we've received, well over 220,000 votes. We actually got to the 100,000 within about 5 3/4 hours. So this is the power of Restore Britain and a unified movement that actually shows the government, shows Starmer, shows those people, those misguided people in Parliament, that there is a huge will amongst the British people to protect our borders, to protect our national interest, and ultimately to detain and deport all those people who arrive here illegally, are living here illegally, foreign criminals in our prisons. It's just a question. We can do it. Of course we can do it.
Do you think this government has the will to do it?
Against military invasion, for goodness sake, Julia. It's a matter of having the willpower to do it.
Yeah.
And the problem is the government doesn't have to suffer the consequences of these people coming in, being settled in the middle of very decent communities where high trust societies have developed. And these are people from different cultures. They're not, I just don't accept the fact that they are asylum seekers. They're economic migrants. Many of them, most of them are young fighting age men. And they are damaging the fabric of Britain. Everybody in the country can see that. I mean, you call yourself the home of common sense. I say to the British people, common sense says we should detain and deport all these people. And as you probably know, I've probably done as much as anybody in Parliament to shift the Overton window on the rape gangs and on detaining and deporting illegal immigrants. If you and I break the law, that's doing something illegal. What happens to us? We get sent to prison. Come on. It's illegal. They're coming here illegally and they're damaging the country.
Well, there's no doubt at all. This is definitely a damaging issue for Keir Starmer. On the left of his party, they don't think anyone should be deported or detained. And on the right and everyone else in the country, they think it's insane that we're not dealing with this issue. He promised to deal with it. He said lots of things. He's clearly not able to do so. He's also facing a lot of pressure over these investigations over what he knew when about Peter Mandelson's relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. Close friendship that continued long after, and very intensely and very lovingly, long after Jeffrey Epstein had actually pleaded guilty to charges of solicitation of prostitution of a 14-year-old girl. What do you make of Keir Starmer being a man who thought that Mandelson was someone he should back at PMQs, even though he knew there was an investigation into these emails that had been released by Bloomberg, that he appointed him in the first place, and that he, as a father of a teenage girl himself, thought that someone who was friends with someone who had done what he'd done with teenage girls was a suitable person to represent this country in America?
Well, I raised this in the House, Julia, so I'm being entirely consistent on this. I think the process that was followed by the Prime Minister and his advisers should be made totally transparent. We should have all the papers face up so that not only the House of Commons, but the public can actually see the process that was followed. Quite apart from the fact that I mean, we all knew that Peter Mandelson had been photographed in his bathrobe, discussing the sale of Sempra commodities with Epstein over breakfast, which, as you know, Epstein had a very fine eye for a photograph. I mean, that was a damning photograph. Things like talking about his hospitality and putting in brackets, yum, yum. I mean, some of the stuff is pretty gopping. But the question, assuming they can get over the process they followed, which I think was probably flawed, because as Starmer admits, he knew that Peter Mandelson was friends with Epstein. The question I asked in Parliament was, why was a man who'd called Donald Trump a danger to the world, who'd been described by the Americans as an absolute moron, who'd been removed from public office at least twice for misfeasance, ultimately, why was he the right person to appoint? Quite apart from his relationship with Epstein, which we all knew about, why was he the right person to appoint as the guardian of the most important relationship this country has with any other country in the world?
It was. I mean, when he was first appointed, many of us were saying this is an insane appointment. Do you think this tells us about Keir Starmer's, just briefly, if you could, so just short on time, in terms of Keir Starmer's?
I don't think it tells us about
Keir Starmer's competence and Keir Starmer's morality.
I think it tells us about the endemic problem with modern politics, Julia, which is that Mandelson went right to the heart of the Blair government. He was one of, I call them the four angels of the apocalypse, or the four horsemen of the apocalypse. I should say angels, the wrong word. Four horsemen of the apocalypse, that's Blair, Brown, Campbell, and Mandelson. So he goes right to the core of all of the legislative damage that was done to undermine our Constitution by the Blairite team. And therefore he, I think, goes right to the root of Labour. And you know, it's these people. It's a bit like, you know, the balls in the cut drawer always have the same numbers on them. Okay, a few of them disappear, but Mandelson is still in there, and he's got the right pedigree, and therefore his name came out. There are many other people far better qualified than
without all of those big skeletons, not even in the closet. Rupert Lowe, we'll have to leave it there. He's an independent MP, leader of Restore Britain. I so appreciate you joining us. Thank you very much.